Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to today's edition of Read Teapots, where I take old stories of narrated and update into modern audio standards. This particular story is called Working Class Mage, written by Hell's Kitchen Sink. "All right, go through the checklist, Esquire," said Johnson. His beard was speckled white, his paunch hanging over his belt as he sat back in his seat. "Checked the hitch?" "Checked. Sitting solid, no giving it." "Brake lines?" "Good looking good. No moisture buildup, no leaks." "Chalked it?"
"Yes, sir."
"All right. Cargo all tied down, double-checked?"
"Yes, sir."
"I'll give it a run-through and make sure, all right." He took out the deck of cards and shuffled them between his fingers several times, the riffling filling the air. He found them out and held them out to me. "Draw!" He closed his eyes and sighed. "Well?"
"This is a pretty weird superstition."
"Well, ain't they all?" "Draw." I reached out and took a card. I drew it and held it up. "Queen of Hearts." "Well, that's some good news. Come on, like I showed you." I sighed and tucked the card into the rig's dashboard above the CB radio. "Queen of Hearts, love life looking good?" "Queen of Hearts represents a female lover, or fantasy. It can also indicate marriage again, but they ain't too likely for someone like me," Johnson said and chuckled. "All right, shotgun loaded?"
"Yes, sir," I said, patting the double-barreled shotgun beneath the dash. "Cleaned it too, though we are carrying toilet paper. Are we really likely to get hijacked?"
"Ain't hijacking I'm worried about. We're driving through North Carolina. Things get a mite territorial down there, ever since they reintroduced the goddamn wolves back in the 80s.
I raised my eyebrows. "You know there's never been a documented unprovoked attack by wolves on a human being, right?"
"Says something about their efficiency, don't it?" he said, shaking his head. All right, let's mosey. Next stop is Atlanta." He shifted the truck into gear. With a low lurch and a rumble, it began to move. "Be honest with me here, Esquire. I know you're not a trucker. Ain't much in the way of young people getting into trucking. It's not going to be around much longer," he snorted. "Not if the revenue men and big corporations have their say about it."
"I guess, I needed a change," I shrugged. "I was a junior associate, big law firm."
"Yeah? Couldn't hack the long hours?"
"Nah, the long hours weren't the thing that bothered me. The isolation was fine, too."
"Yeah? Why leave, then? This job got the same damn awful hours and the same isolation, and it's never going to make you rich."
"I was doing a case, for this landlord. They were getting an eviction done. It was, boilerplate stuff. I was basically just putting up forms for them. Got the eviction order, got the guy out of his home." I was quiet for a second. "I was reading the newspaper. 3 weeks later, I recognized the name from the forms. They found the guy I evicted dead in the park. Overdose."
"Ha!" He looked across me. "You've got a conscience."
"I know, right? The partners were so disappointed in me. Everyone told me it wasn't my fault, that I'd been just doing my job. And I thought to myself, what kind of job does that?"
"So why not volunteer in a soup kitchen? Join Amnesty International? Go build habitats for humanity, all that kind of thing?" he asked, an eyebrow raised.
"Maybe someday. For now, I wanted to get away from what I knew, and besides," I shrugged, "still gotta make a living."
"Well, ain't that the truth? We all gotta survive," said Johnson, as he reached under the dashboard, taking out a card. "Chaw, put hairs on your chest."
"No thanks."
"Suit yourself."
He dug into a piece and chewed it between his gums.
"Got into the stuff when I was in Nam. Met the South Vietnamese shaman. He grew the stuff in a swamp. Fed it on the bones of the dead. Never would answer my questions about what kind of dead. But he said it could give a man the strength to live on the verge of death. Damn good stuff."
He spat out the window.
"Well, you're entering a dying industry. Give it 15, 20 years. All those trucks, they've got to be run by computers. And then we'll see some hell. A lot of towns, a lot of people out on the highway rely on truckers for their livelihood. But that ain't ever mattered to men upstairs."
He rolled down the window and spat the water-brown-tinged saliva flying through the air, disappearing into the medium strip like a comet, bearing tidings of woe and chaos and gum cancer. "Yeah," I said, nodding quietly.
"And it ain't just the money they're relying on," he said.
I frowned at this and waited for him to continue. He didn't. "How do you deal with the boredom?" I asked. After 15 minutes, watching the trees pass was beautiful, and the clouds were lovely today. But you can only contemplate the majesty of nature for so long.
"I cherish it. Being a soldier taught me that boredom is a gift. Peaceful times, no threats. It's when you're not bored that someone's going to die."
He frowned as he drove along, his shoulders hunching slightly, long shadows drawn over his face.
"Been doing this ever since I got back. Saw some terrible things. Learned some terrible things. Decided to do something about the terrible things."
"What, toilet paper shortages?" I asked, giving a slight smile. He chuckled, and the dark atmosphere around him seemed to vanish.
"You've got a smart mouth, huh? Well, I can appreciate that. A good joke is a great comfort in times of trouble." He chewed quietly for a few seconds, and then spat again. "The greatest gift a man can have is to realize how little he knows. You can't learn something unless you know you don't know."
"I guess so," I said, sitting back. "Mind if I read a bit?"
"Yeah, sure, Esquire. Whatever you gonna do to keep the road moving."
He flicked on the CV as I slipped the novel out of my pocket. I occasionally looked up and saw him watching the road. There was something terribly intense in that gaze. His bands and feet moved automatically on the gears and clutch as we crested hills and shifted through traffic. I had the impression that he'd seen it all before. As we sat at the weigh station, he looked over at me. "You want to drive for a while?" "Yeah, sure. I've done it a few times before, though. I might ride the brakes a little hard."
"That's always the way when you start. Some things there's no learning in a book. Ain't in human nature to be able to figure out how exactly far you have to push down a pedal to slow without jerking against the seatbelts or fishtailing. Just something you gotta learn by feel."
"Qualia of sensation."
"God bless you," he said, as he stepped out and shifted places. He sat in the passenger seat and crossed his legs, wrists placed on his knees, his eyes closed. His breathing became steady and regular as I carefully, gingerly, pulled us out into traffic, watching my surroundings carefully.
"Didn't take you for much of a meditator," I said, after perhaps 20 miles, as I started to feel the fuzz of boredom and the road hypnosis begin to descend.
"You learned that in Vietnam, too?" "As a matter of fact, I did. Our medic was a conscientious objector, a pacifist. He had been raised Buddhist by his parents and taken seriously to it. Learned a lot from him. Never agreed with him, but he was probably a better man than me."
He breathed in once and then out, opening his eyes.
"Handy to be able to be aware of your surroundings. You got a bear on your tail."
"Oh, shit," I said, looking back in the window. He'd been far enough back that I hadn't noticed, but I slowed slightly.
"Not too slow. Keep confident. Don't want him to be suspicious."
"Ah, hells," he glowered as the lights went on. I pulled us over. "I'm sorry."
"It's fine, Esquire. Just another one of those things you learn on the job."
The truck came to a resting stop, and we both sat. Me with my hands on the wheel, him with his hands visible on his lap. There was a glower on his face. "Are we going to be in any trouble?"
"Depends on the cop," he muttered. "Some are reasonable, some are just looking for a ticket. Some want to cause some trouble. Ah, hell, it's her."
I rolled down the window, pulling out the keys, and smiled as the officer approached. She raised an eyebrow and then looked past me, mirrored sunglasses framed by dark brown hair. "Well, Johnson, it's rare to see you riding around with yon young squire. License and registration, young man."
"Hello, Bethany. The new bacon-scented perfume smells particularly lovely. Or did you forget to shower this morning?"
I froze, swallowing hard as Johnson reached into the dashboard and passed me the registration. The police officer stood, expression stone-faced. "Well, good to see that you haven't let the weight of the world step on your balls too hard. Surprised you're still driving off than the last time we met. You almost lost a kidney, as I recall."
"Well, that's why the good Lord gave us two," said Johnson, leaning back. "What's this about, Bethany? I know the newbie wasn't driving too fast. He's too nervous for that kind of thing."
"Oh, I know. But you don't think that I wouldn't notice my favorite knight-errant driving through, do you?" She smiled sweetly. "I just came to give you a gentle warning. Keep out of affairs. You think you smell something, you keep on going. None of your little displays, Johnson. Things are fragile enough here, you understand me?"
"Crystal clear, officer,"
said Johnson. "Let me rephrase that. Will you take my advice to heart and not do anything rash?"
"I promise you," he said, "I will very carefully consider the ramifications of my actions before doing what I damn well please."
Bethany sighed. "You're going to get yourself killed someday, you know that, Art."
"Yeah, officer," said Johnson. "We all do. I'm just hoping it isn't heart disease or throat cancer that gets me. Anything else?"
She opened her mouth and held it open for a moment, before sighing and shook her head. "Nah. Best of luck, Art." His expression softened.
"You too, Bethany."
She walked back to her car and drove off. I frowned at Johnson. "Friend of yours?"
"More than that, sometimes. She used to be a great cop. She's still an okay one."
He was quiet for a moment and sighed.
"That sort of job wears you down. The things you see that you can't do anything about. She taught me a lot. One of the best people I ever knew, till she got tired of trying so hard."
"What happens?"
"Ain't for you to worry about," he said stiffly. "You're a dilettante, Esquire. You're doing this for a lark. This isn't your living, and chances are pretty bad that it ever will be."
"Hey," I said, looking over at him. "I just want to help."
"Yeah, well, where did that ever get anyone?" he said, grouchily, leaning back in his chair. "You from a good family? Upper class?"
"Middle class," I said, and then felt embarrassed by how stinging that admission had made me feel. "I mean upper middle class. My dad's a doctor. Mom was finance."
"Could have me,"
"Ha," he said, a bit back anger. I took a deep breath. "Yeah, I never had to worry about eating, but it wasn't easy for me."
"Life ain't easy for anyone. Your problems are always just as big as you are," he said. I met men in the jungle who had napalm being dropped around their ears and never cracked. I met a woman who had never worked a day in her life who was so worried about whether she'd ever be a huge success that she wound up in a nut house. Life's not easy. It's just different kinds of hard, he sighed, leaned back. Stop at the way station outside Relay. Got some friends there, Esquire. I nodded quietly as I drove onward. The road pulled past, lazy miles passing us by. You don't do much talking on the CB, huh? Not nowadays. Too many friends I won't hear from. He shifted in his seat, his splint hard gaze fixed on the horizon. The rest of the way, I stayed silent. It was evening, the sky turning purple. Brilliant clouds lit red from beneath and glowing luminously as we pulled into the truck stop. It was one of the old-school ones, a large gas station out in the front, dozens of rigs in the back, a handful of cars in the parking lot in front of the food center, flickering signs advertising half a dozen franchises. Always spook me out, truck stops, even spending as much time as I have in them, Johnson said, waving a hand. There are just, something empty about them. Liminal spaces, I said. Places made for passing through. They're where things change. They seem odd because they're not designed to spend long periods in. Just a brief visit. Whatever you say. Round the back here, he nodded. Lot lizards. Prostitutes, sometimes. I don't get much comfort from talking to them. He nodded as I pulled in. A half-dozen women stood together in a hot summer night, dressed provocatively. I'd be lying if I said that they were pretty. Most of them looked as they had had very hard lives. One of them, wearing a red wig, gave Johnson a very genuine-looking smile as he stepped out. It took 20 years of her expression. But even from here, I could feel the tension around them, the tight hold of cigarettes and tense shoulders, the weary expressions. Ladies, you look like you're having a rough night, he smiled and stepped towards the red-haired one, effecting a deep bow as he took her hand and gave a kiss. Rose? Hey, Artie. Who's the kid? This is Perry. Perry, meet Rose. She's been working this truck stop since I started trucking. I nodded and held up my hand. A pleasure to meet you, ma'am. Well, not often we see Artie walking around with a squire, said Rose, smiling. You gotten initiated? Initiated? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Still feeding him out, said Johnson. He frowned. What's going on, Rose? Nothing worth worrying about, she said, letting go of my hand, looking at me briefly. Don't worry about the squire. Worry about what's going on. Rose bit her lip. You know the Manstrom family, yeah? Yeah, the law firm. They're run by that crazy bitch, Felicity Manstrom. Yeah. Her son. She was quiet for a moment. He went, bad. Real bad. Been walking around town lately, picking up working girls. Some of them don't show up the next day. The ones that do look in bad shape. I put the word out, but there are a few girls out there who are new or desperate. Gwen was here earlier, and I saw her step into his car. She looked to one side. A lot of girls have been disappearing in the last year. Firstborn son of a great lawyer, said Johnson, his expression dark. Got something of hers? She dropped her lipstick, said one of the other women, holding it out. Artie, said Rose, it's not worth it. It's always worth it, said Johnson. All right, Esquire, unhitch the trailer and into the cab. I took my time unhitching, disconnecting the brake lines and wiring and double-checking everything. Then I stepped up to the door, entering the passenger side, and sat down as Johnson drew the cards. He began to shuffle them and held them out to me. 3. I nodded and pulled them. But shouldn't we call the police or something? What do you have planned? Just drive around until you see this guy? Are you some kind of vigilante serial killer? I held up the cards. Ace of spades, 9 of spades, queen of spades. A major change, a loss, and a cruel woman, said Johnson, his lips tight. You have a choice, Esquire. You can stay here with the lot lizards while I deal with this and stay in the dark. Or you can come along with me. If you choose the latter, you're learning things. And you can't unlearn these things. Even if you leave the moment I tell you, you'll remember them. Tell me. He raised an eyebrow. Not even a second of hesitation? You're scaring the hell out of me, sir. If I have a choice between scared of what I don't know and what I do know, I'm going to be with the latter. He sighed and nodded. All right. There's magic. I blinked. All right. Shut up, Esquire, and let me inform you. There's magic. I know some. A lot of people I've met know some. Everyone can do a little bit of it. Thing is, you can't read about it. You can't be taught it. You can only really learn it on the job. Sometimes someone can give you a place to start, but you can't learn it in college or a lecture. He held out a lipstick on his dashboard in a small tray, setting it upright. He bit his finger and drew a circle around the edge of the circular tray with his own blood. Then he reached under the dashboard and took out the shotgun shells, and opened the tip, pouring out the tiny silvery balls onto it with clacking sound. This is something I learned from Bethany. The police, they're good at this kind of thing. They used to be the ones who kept an eye on these things, back before.
He pressed his lips together. Well, I learned it from her. He watched it, and as he started, the ball bearing shifted, moving on the tray, quite notably pushing against the slant of the tray, until they formed a diamond pointing forward and to the right. All right, it's working. She's still alive. He gunned the truck and started. You're using a magnet. This has to be some kind of prank. Hazing, right? It's an initiation, kid. Magic's real. Monsters are real. Monsters eat people. They manipulate people. They corrupt people. You ever heard the saying power corrupts? It's not just a goddamn colloquial metaphor on the inherent evils of man. When you do something awful, it changes you. Now, the richer you are, the more powerful things you can get away with. He glared out the front window. The truck started. I drive around a lot, make a lot of friends. Most truckers do. We talk. We learn things. Sometimes we do things. Like murdering serial killers, I asked, slightly frantic. He was accelerating rapidly, and I pulled out my seatbelt. Serial killers are still human. Still got those shells loaded in. Check in the back. 4 ones in the bread box. I looked in the back, feeling increasingly panicked. I was in a car with a lunatic with an itchy trigger finger and a shotgun, and judging from the text on the red box, he also owned magnesium-filled Dragon's Breath rounds. Why in God's name do you have these? What silver and iron don't kill, fire does, he said, as though that explained it. The ball bearing shifted, and he took the truck into a skidding turn, the trailer fishtailing slightly as I clung to the seat to avoid being thrown against the door. You want some, kid? He asked, fishing out the chewing tobacco. Does you a world of good in a fight? Wait, I'm joining the fight. That's up to you, he said, and he hit the brakes hard as the tray of ball bearings shifted. We were on a long stretch of backcountry road, barely even qualifying as pavement. The dirt road led up to a steep slope, towards the dark, squat wooden shack. A light was illuminating a fogged window from within. Johnson handed me a can and chewed vigorously, drawing his shotgun, slipping the tire iron into the back of his pants. Why are you doing this? I asked, softly, frantically. Starfish, he said, and he spat on the ground, opening the door and jumping down. He moved in a low run, and he seemed to fade as he moved, becoming only a barely perceptible shifting of the gravel as he sped up the hill. I followed him, carrying the tobacco can in one hand as I tried not to make too much noise. He stopped at the door and held up a hand. I approached, I opened my mouth, and he held a finger to his lips. I nodded, and he held up a can of oil. I blinked, and then took it from him, comprehending in an instant that he pointed at the hinges. I ran a few drops across the hinges and reached out, taking the handle. He nodded, and I pulled it back slowly, the hinges soundless as the wooden door swung open. The smell of blood hit like a fist. I gagged as Johnson stepped forward, calmly, confidently. There were no bodies, no blood visible, which somehow made the smell worse. In the center of the room, a woman sat in a chair. She was young, pretty, her face made up, her clothing torn, mascara dripping down her cheeks where tears had been falling. She was still sobbing, but there were no tears now, only soft, choking little sounds as her shoulders heaved, her shoulders shivering. Johnson crouched down. It's okay, miss, he said softly. She looked up sharply, her eyes widening, terrified. It's okay. You've got to get out of here, she whispered softly. He left, but he said that he'd be back soon, that he'd have his tools. She let out a soft little rasp, her eyes focusing behind us. The arm hit me like a tree trunk. I slammed into the wall, gasping for breath, my head spinning, as the red-skinned shadow moved past me. It had to be at least 8 feet tall, humanoid, at least vaguely, with a pair of massive, gnarled-black horns emerging from the scalp, carved out and down, framing a face that was almost feminine, slender and pretty. No hair, just shaggy mass of what looked like grey lichen clinging from the scalp and down the back. Great black furred legs, reversed at the knees, ending in goat hooves. I tried to stand and slid down the wall, barely able to breathe. It loomed on the short, paunchy trucker. The shotgun came up with surprising speed, but the creature struck it across the barrel with his wrist, sending it tumbling end over end into the wall a few feet from me. The creature reared back, and Johnson's cheeks puffed out. A thick brown water spit splattered into the creature's face, into one of its eyes, and smoke rose from its face as it shrieked, grabbing and clawing at its face. Johnson landed a firm kick with his steel-toed boots to the creature's belly, driving it back a step. It recovered with a stunning speed, lunging forward at him. With one eye out of commission, it was crippled. He rolled into its blind spot, one of his feet lashing out with the speed born of 1,000 ballroom balls, colliding with his ankle with an ugly crunch. He was back on his feet in no time, driving the cleated tip of his boot into the creature's back.
right in the kidneys, bringing a terrible, wailing screech. Johnson gritted his teeth as I clamped my hands over my ears, the resonant frequencies making my head shake. I saw blood drip down Johnson's cheeks, twin red trails leading up to his ears as he advanced, the tendon standing out on the back of his hand. His palm struck the creature's diaphragm, and all at once the resonance died. "The shotgun, kid! The shot!" The cry ended as a wet choke as the creature lashed out blindly with one arm. Johnson threw himself backwards, the only thing saving him from being reduced to a wet blotch. The creature loomed up, dark figure standing tall. I scrabbled across the ground, pain dancing along my spine like the devil was using it as for a dance floor, trying to force my fingers to obey. I brought it up as the creature approached and pulled the trigger. Flame roared. My eardrums pulsed from the abuse that they'd been put through. My ears were dazzled, my entire world going dark as I went flash blind. I blinked, breathing hard. Something hit me like a sledgehammer, driving me spinning across the room. I blinked furiously, my cheeks burning as salty tears dripped down them, trying furiously to blink away the blindness. My eyes cleared. The creature stood over me. A terrible human smile was visible on its monstrous alien face, shiny white incisors gleaming, canine sharp and stained, lips dragged back in rictus. Its hair was scorched, but that was the limit of the damage done. "Spicy," the thing said, and laughed as it raised one clawed hand. The sharp edge of the tire iron emerged from the creature's shoulder. It screeched, its arm falling limply to its side as the tire iron withdrew, and its scream ended wetly, with the blunt end slamming into the creature's head, knocking it to the ground. It wetly choked and gagged, reaching up to its arm. Johnson brought the tire iron down again on its shoulder, snapping the joint, leaving the arm limply hanging at its side. It turned to face him, jaw wide, ready to snap at him, teeth gleaming. The tire iron flashed through the air. The head tilted slowly and rolled off the creature's shoulders, falling to the ground with a wet slap. Johnson let out a low breath, panting, hard, sinking to his feet. His right arm was still hanging limply, blood dripping down his fingers. Even as I watched, his ribs shifted in his vest visibly, the wet crackling filling the air as he winced. "Heck! Got that chaw, Esquire?" he asked. I blinked, trying to get my head together, patting my chest, feeling for the can. Don't worry about it," he said, stepping past me. His voice had a peculiar resonant quality of someone with a sucking chest wound, but he didn't seem remotely worried as he checked on the girl, kneeling beside her. "Looks like she fainted. Probably was forced to sit for a while. She'll be okay." He looked up as bright red and blue lights flashed through the windows. "We should pray to be so lucky." "It's the police, though, right?" I said, breathing hard, trying to pull myself up to standing position. "They're on our side, right?" "Used to be." "Yeah," said Johnson, as he sank down to his knees, putting his hands behind his head. As the door burst open, I found myself facing two angry, panicky deputies, their pistols leveled at me. I became terribly aware of the weight and the shotgun in my hands. "Drop the gun now! No sudden moves." Somehow, I made it through without getting shot by the police. As my criminal justice professor had always said, any encounter with the police that ended without a bullet wound was a successful one. Johnson and I sat in the interrogation chairs. "But that wasn't human. They can't charge us," I said softly. "Death breaks curses. Useful in some cases, fucking inconvenient in others. So far as everyone out there knows is concerned, we just murdered a perfectly normal human. Besides, this is the kind of town run by a powerful, and people don't have kids that look like that if they're not bursting with power," said Johnson, his voice low, growling, sitting in the table. "Just relax, kid. Let me do all the talking." The door opened. Felicity Manstrom, rather like her son, was tall, dark, and terrible. Her long dark hair hung around her face, streaks of white mixed in with black, her expression solemn. "Artemis Johnson," she said, as she sat at the table across from us. Two police officers stood flanking her, holding shotguns leveled at us. I swallowed. "You know, my son, he was always foolish. The worst of both parents, my husband's openness, his refusal to see the downside of anything, of anyone. My drive, my ambition, my determination to have what I desired. He was always going to get himself in too deep, and yet he was mine, my son, my darling boy," she smiled, a wan, thin-lipped expression. "There's no amount of torment and suffering I could visit upon you that will repay the debt you owe. But I'm no quitter. I'll give it my best shot on you and your—" her eyes drifted towards me, "apprentice." "The boy's not a part of this," growled Johnson. "He became a part of this the moment that he aimed that gun at my boy. He became a part of this. Putting the trigger was a formality. You know you don't give us second chances when it comes to family," said the woman. Sorry, Esquire, muttered Johnson. Didn't expect them to be that close. Suppose I didn't think the police would be so, corrupt. His eyes flicked to the men with the shotguns. They had a decency to look ashamed, but not enough to lower their weapons. The girl will be set free. She barely remembers what happened. Her testimony won't matter. When marlin lands in your net, you don't stop to worry about the sardines caught alongside it, said Felicity, a smile on her lips. Now, or in 90 days, you can try to escape, to heroically leap free. Perhaps if you sacrifice yourself like that, I will hold no ill will towards your apprentice, or the girl. I can afford to ignore the small things, knowing that you are dead, Johnson. I heard the soft rustling of chains. 2 police officers took a step back, raising their shotguns, leveling them at Johnson. He eyed them, his expression level, cold. I saw him begin to sit up, and their fingers tightened. Phone call. Felicity turned her head to me, an eyebrow raised. I realized I said the words. What, young man? Phone call. We have the right to an attorney. Whatever you might have planned, we get a call. Oh, please, she chuckled, her cheeks wrinkling. I'm a monster. Do you think I care about justice? About what is right? About what is wrong? You're a lawyer. Those things are nonsense, I said, sitting straight in my chair. What you care about is procedure. No one would defend him. Do you know the damage this man has done to lawyers over the years? None of us have not lost someone to him. None of us do not want him dead. I smiled. What kind of good lawyer would let that keep them from representing a client? Come on, are you giving me the call or not? She stared at me for a long few moments. I could feel Johnson's gaze on my cheek. She snorted and reached into her pocket, taking out a cell phone, unlocking it and handing it to me. I typed in the number. Mr. Niyama? Hi. Yes, sir. Hi. I'm afraid it is important. I noted the blood draining out of Felicity Manstrom's face. Yes, I've run into a bit of legal trouble. Yes, sir. I used your personal advice. Yes, sir. I'm calling in that favor. I pressed the phone and smiled. The private jet is in New York. He'll be here in the morning. I smiled. Biddy, and what makes you think you'll be here in the morning? Mr. Johnson's not emotional, I said, flying on the wave of pure optimism and bravado, not daring to look down in case gravity reasserted its hold. He killed your son because he was an evil son of a bitch, pardon my indelicate language. He made it quick and as painless as one can. I worked for Mr. Yama for 3 long years. He never made anything quick, and painless was never in his vocabulary. I felt my nerves singing, doing everything I could to not look at the man with the shotguns leveled at me. I think that I never met a lawyer who wasn't bound in one way or another by the law. I think that you rely on the law to protect you. I think that you rely on your prey to not understand enough to protect themselves. My knuckles whitened. But I understand, Mrs. Manstrom. She smiled, just a little too wide, her teeth drawn into rictus. Well, if you wish to jump out of a frying pan, I won't stop you, young man. If you survive, I'm sure you'll fit in with our ranks. You wouldn't happen to have any hot chocolate, would you? I said sweetly, as she glared at me. Without a word, she stood and left the room. I looked across the table at Johnson. His legs were crossed, his wrists resting between them, thumbs touching forefingers, his eyes closed once again. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the roof, wondering how I was going to deal with the fallout from this. Owing a favor to Mr. Yama had been bad enough when I thought that he was just a pushy boss, rather than actually empowered by hell. There was a soft click, and the cuffs loosened, and then fell from my wrists. I snorted, blinking, bewildered. The dark interrogation room suddenly flooded with light from the hallway. Meh? You're free to go, said a firm, authoritative voice. Mr. Johnson? Yes, said Johnson, his voice gruff as he sat, his legs crossed in the chair, hands resting in his lap. So our freedom has been bought. The officer didn't answer, approaching him cautiously. 2 men behind him, with shotguns held out, leveled at Johnson. The trucker didn't shift as they unlocked his cuffs, simply rotating his wrists. He nodded quietly at the men standing up. Johnson, I began, but he had his head turned away from me, rubbing his wrists. There's always a price. You should know that. But it's so hard to tell what the fair price is, said a warm, smooth voice from the hallway. Mr. Johnson, it is an honor. Mr. Yama stood in the hallway, silhouetted by the light, like God's eldest son. His teeth shone white in the reflection of the interrogation room walls. Percival, it is good to see that you have been well. Come, we need a good talk. He smiled at me. I'm glad to see that you've had a taste of both sides of our little equation. Those who've seen the real world are so much better at embracing us, I confess. I'd written you off after our little episode. But to see you call me again... You, Johnson said softly. Mr. Artemis Johnson, I'm a great fan, said Mr. Yama, his voice oily and warm. You've always been a fine ally. I remember seeing the reports from your wartime service, he chuckled. You were a great warrior. Oh, the pain you brought, the fear, the desolation, the widows you made, the desperation. There are so few who can match you, you know, he sighed. If only you had stuck to wartime. You could have been a general by now with your spirit, or perhaps a hero. Johnson didn't answer, his fists tightening as he walked. Oh, yes, said Mr. Yummer, still laughing. You are thinking now of how good it would feel to give in to those primitive urges. They didn't find the silver shell in your pocket, did they? I looked up to the side and could see Johnson's hand in his pocket, clenched into a fist. Perhaps, if you were quick enough, you could take my life, kill me. Oh, it would be quite the battle. Of course, you would definitely die, and I would maybe die. But there are so many more men like me than men like you, he said, smiling. You truly are one of a kind. What a tragic state of affairs. Said Johnson. Taciturn, I understand. You never were a man of words. They're your enemy. They twist in your grasp. They feel empty. Meaningless, Mr. Yower chuckled. The power of our world is to make your convictions feel false. Your old joke about starfish. How much did being saved mean to that girl, still trapped in the chains of poverty and obligation? Saved from one predator, fed to 1,000 others. You preserved her life so that she may die another day. He laughed. I'd save you 1,000 times, Johnson. You, the perfect fool. The greatest tool we have is hope. The hope in the hearts of the downtrodden that some hero will come to save them. The knowledge that you're out there makes the unbearable bearable. It gives them power to soldier on through the impossible pain. That gives me such power. Mr. Yummer smiled, patting his shoulder. Without heroes, how could anyone stand this world? It's the wonderful thing about mortality, said Johnson. I'll definitely die, probably before you. But there are so many more mortals around than immortals, and we know how to teach each other the tricks. It'd take me a month, maybe two, to make someone as good a fighter as me. Whereas you could spend 100 years training someone, and you could never really make them your successor, could you? Because if something could equal you, they'd take your place, Johnson laughed. There are so many more people like me than like you. And the people like me, we can work together. He looked sideways, and his eyes met mine. Manstrom thought that he was in control, right until the moment where his head hit the ground. Really, said Mr. Yummer, his voice smooth, calm, as he opened the door. I don't think that you realize your position, he said, as he stepped out into the sunlight. You're very proud to risk your life for the weak, but you forget every man dies alone. The diesel engine revved softly, its engine idling softly. The 18-wheeler stood in the parking lot across 4 spaces, its engine revving slowly. Mr. Johnson's grin lit his face as his cheeks wrinkled on bright. Oh, I always know my position, he said, chuckling. The headlights flashed on the truck. But I made a decision long ago. No matter how I die, it won't be alone. Good luck. Keep your eyes open, because someone like me is always watching. He opened the door to his truck. Thanks for helping me out. It won't stop me for a moment when you're in my crosshairs. I'll kill you without a second thought. He looked at me. Esquire, come on. We're going to get these shit tickets to Hotlanta. You know, said Mr. Yummer, there is still a place open for you, Mr. Percival. Yes, sir, I said, and smiled as I stepped around the engine, stepping up into the footrest. I'll let you know. I slipped into the seat, keeping eye contact with Mr. Yummer as the truck shifted into gear. It rumbled softly as the truck revved out the parking lot. You could have gotten out of that at any time, I said softly. Probably. More risky. More people would have died. He was quiet for a moment. You've seen both sides. It's not likely that you'll get another chance like that to duck out of this life. It won't work a second time. Most of the people who do this kind of job die. You'd be surprised. Some people are content to make the same mistake time after time. I'm guessing you've never learned much about that side of things. Johnson snorted, looking out the window as we rode up the highway on ramp. No, I can't say that I have, Esquire. So, am I still welcome to work with you, even after what I did? Of course, said Johnson, chuckling. It's a real comfort to ourselves to think that everyone is like them, that I might lose hope just because they take advantage of it. But they don't get it at all. We crested the ramp, and the brilliant sun glowed down the highway. Shafts of gold flowed across the tops of the Great Smoky Mountains, vaulted through the clouds to become ethereal, shadowy, the trees shivering like emeralds in the morning light. A wash of cool, misty air ran through the windows as he smiled. You think she's going to be okay? Who knows? The starfish thing. You ever heard of it? I think I can guess. A man sees a kid on the beach. Thousands of dried-up starfish are sitting on the beach, tossed up by the waves. The kid occasionally picks one up, throws it into the water. The man walks up and asks why he bothers. The kid could do it all day, and what's the difference would it make? The kid picks one up and tosses it back into the water. It'll make all the difference to that one. Art smiled. Yeah, that's the one. He took a deep breath as we drove into the lee of one of the mountains, the sun haloing it in the light, brilliant rays visible rising around it. Maybe I'll die tonight, heart attack, whatever. But I got to see this morning, and so did she. And that made the fight last night all worth it. He grinned as he flicked on the CB. Good morning, everyone, he said, his voice cheerful. This is Art and Mirrodin, heading down to Hotlanta, keeping our eyes out for bears and wolves and any other dark things in the woods. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.